Today is June 7th, 2005. This is the Fortunoff Video Archive for Holocaust Testimonies at Yale University, and I am Joanne Rudolph.
And I'm Lawrence L. Langer.
I'm Hersch Aron. I was born in Cluj.
That's in Romania?
It was Romania when I was a child. I went to Romanian schools for the elementary part of my life. And I really had, before the Holocaust, I really had a very hard life.
Tell us when you were born first. When were you born?
1924, 23 September.
All right, you had a hard life.
Very, very difficult life. So that makes it more difficult to go on. And then, of course, the Holocaust came, and this broke down into more tragedies that I had. I lost all my parents, my grandparents, those. It's very, very difficult to really go on in a way that you should be able to dissect the whole situation, the way things were. Being that if you are born in a poor house, let's say, so your life is as a child is very, very difficult. My mother was at times, because she also came. For instance, my grandmother was only 14 years old when she got married, because she was an orphan. She didn't have no parents. In the place where they were placed her, she was like a maid there, so she couldn't go on. So she found this young man, and she got married by 14. And by 19, her husband died, and she was a widow with 5 children. And I don't have to tell you what this woman went through. And in those days, there was it's not America. It was like a little hick town in Europe. So I don't have to tell you what she went through with these 5 children. So my mother was one of the children that, so she had, she grew up and she wasn't too healthy because they never had milk, they never had anything. The only food that they could get was in their food was, the staple food was cornmeal. They made a cereal like. And they didn't have milk for the children, because that actually is tasty if you have milk to it. But if you only have vinegar and water to it, then I don't have to explain everything, how hard that is. So my mother grew up and she wasn't well, so she wasn't a well woman. And that made our life as children. Imagine, my father had the same thing. He was also an orphan by very, very young, and he didn't have a home. So he grew up in some rabbi's home. First he was sleeping on the benches in the shul, and then the rabbi took him into his house, and there he grew up until the time he met my mother. So at that time, for a girl to get married was extremely difficult. He didn't make actually a living, and there was no way how she could support herself. There was no way how a girl could support herself at that point in life. So she married my father, and my father got himself a job in the community where he was like a teacher, called a malamed. In this way, we lived. But at those times, it was the time of depression, and they couldn't pay him his wages. So we really, as children, we had an extremely hard time to exist. And then when the Nazi area broke out, so I happened to be the oldest child in the family.
How many brothers and sisters?
I had 3 brothers. We were 3 brothers, 3 boys, and there was one little girl. And so when time came and it took us away, I remained outside because they forced me to work. I was only 14 years old, not even 14. And they took me to work, slave labor at 14 to build ski. You jump from the ski, or you call those ski. And that's what I was doing. Every morning I had to go out, get up early in the morning. That was before the Nazis took over.
That was when the Hungarians occupied?
When the Hungarians, under the Hungarians yet, when things were supposedly good yet. So I was working every morning, and then...
Were you still living at home?
I was still living. There was no way. It wasn't like the same
No,
time.
but when you were doing the ski lift?
Yeah, sure. There was no other place to live but home. So they took me in the morning to work, and at night I came home. Then when the Nazis took over the government, then they took me from that kind of work. They took me to where the Germans are to the trains to unload when the supplies came in, and I had to come every morning and go to work. And when they finally took the whole family into the ghetto, it was like a brick factory where when they dig out mortar to make bricks. And so they took the whole city, the Jews, they took them there. So I was left outside. By the time I wanted to go home, I came home, the houses were locked, and I didn't have a place where to enter. So the super in the building opened up a woodshed, and he bed me out with a little straw, and I should stay there. So I got a certain, it was an invitation, a call to go to forced labor to work for it's called Munkotabor. That was have you ever heard that? So I got that piece of paper to go into a certain place and have that. So being that I was outside, and I was old enough to understand that they didn't go into the ghetto with food and with things to have. So I figured I'm going to go with that piece of paper, and I'm going to want to say goodbye to them and to show to them that what I got. And when I went in there, I asked me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I just want to say, I came to say goodbye to my parents," and I showed them that I have to go here and here at that time. And they looked at me and said, "Where do you want to go?" He told those police that they were there, pick them up and throw them in with the rest of them. So I spoke to him in Hungarian, and I thanked him. I said, "I really don't want to go where they called me in to go. I want to go where my parents are going to go." And you want to go? They picked me up and they threw me out from the office. They kicked me behind, and they threw me out. And that actually, to a certain degree, it saved my life, because I never wound up to go to Auschwitz with the rest of the family. But to me, when I broke down, that was the culprit of my...
This would have been the spring of 1944?
That was, yeah.
And you were about 20 at that time?
I was younger than 20, actually. I was in between, because when I came into the United States, I came on underage. I actually made myself a little younger because I couldn't have survived. So because I came to this country, you have to understand that you couldn't survive. You had to have certain gimmicks. The way to survive something like that, you have to do. So I made myself a little younger, and they took Mrs. Roosevelt brought me over as a minor. So I came to this country as a minor. I was a little bit older, but being that I knew how to scheme, so I. Matter of fact, President Carter did me a very, very big favor. He made a law for us, all those people who did that, they said you could, otherwise I would have problems to collect Social Security, because being that I was younger, I would have to work another 10 years in order to receive Social Security. He said all those people who could prove that they were there and there, they could get Social Security. They could you could put down on the papers what happened, and you could get yours. And that's the way I had. Yeah, but being that, what really sparked, when I couldn't say goodbye to my parents, that was such a shock to me that it almost killed me there. Because I really first of all, I didn't see them, I did not see them go. I did not, I did not see them taken away. Being that I wanted to give them something, and they stopped me from doing that. It was terrible. And all this, you imagine, I'm an old man, and it never left my being to. And also, when I was in labor, that was supposed to be not in Auschwitz. It's not a bed of roses. When I went to work, I was sleeping on the bare floors where the Hungarians sent me to work. I was sleeping on the bare floors for 6 or 7 months, and then they decided to give us bunks. So all my bones are, I have rheumatism through and through because of that. And then, while we were, I was while I was there working, it wasn't that bad because they gave us food. Because I was working in Hungary, in Budapest, I was working there in a place. As a matter of fact, I was working for Siemens. The Siemens factory had a factory there that they made cables, and I was in that cable factory for quite a while. But I really, whatever happened to me there, they were bombing in Budapest. When they were bombing the city, they didn't let, the non-Jews, they could go into the shelters. They had very strong shelters. They could all go to the shelters. But we, the Jews, we couldn't go in there. We had to stay in the factory. If a bomb fell on you, then just too bad. And I wasn't worried about that. I was going to sleep while they were bombing. I was going into the shelves, metal shelves, and I was sleeping. And I really waited for that. I did not, in all the way till I was liberated. There were so many episodes that really, imagine, they took me, after a while, I was working to a certain, when the Nazis, took over the Hungarian government, all of a sudden they stopped all this work that we did for the Siemens, and they put them in transports, and they took them to Austria and and I had enough foresight at that age. I did not, whenever they made those lineups that we should have to go in put us on the trains, I ran away. I left myself out, and they took everybody away. While I was there, and I didn't have where to eat, so I used to go into farms, and I used to tell them that I need food. Hey, who are you? And I didn't tell them I was Jewish. Blonde I was. I didn't look like a Jewish boy. So they took me on the farm, and they gave me food. But after a while, that wasn't the solution, because I wanted to set up myself to sleep. They gave me a place in the barn to sleep. And while I was set myself up, all of a sudden I see Nazi soldiers come into the family, and they said, and after a while the family said that these are our children, they are our boys. And it's called them Volksdeutschen. They were not Germans, but they were ever heard that?
Volksdeutsch, German ancestry. but
That's
what-
right.
Do you know
And
where that farm was?
It was in Hungary. So they set me down. They were very nice to us, and all of a sudden they wanted to convince me I should join the German army and go with them and fight the Russians. I saw the Professors. I have a big problem. So at night I picked myself up and I ran away from there. And after I started going, I saw I'm in trouble. So they had a group that when they dissolved the workplace that I left, they took us to Hungary to put us, like I said before, they put us on the train. And then when I saw that what happened to me, that I have no place to go, so I put myself in a lineup. It wasn't soldiers; it were these workers that were groups.
The slave laborers.
The slave laborers. Instead of going into Germany, because it was the whole situation was in disarray. They did not have a real control over whoever was where you are. So they took some groups. They took them back to Budapest, and I put myself in a lineup, and I walked back to Budapest. In what do I do in Budapest? They put us in a room there, a whole bunch of people. They put us in a. At one point I was sitting there with a bunch of boys. They were playing cards, and they had bunks, and I was on the top bunk, and all of a sudden, instead of playing with the boys, I said I had one friend next to me, was sitting next to me. He didn't play cards either. We just watched the rest of them. All of a sudden, I got an intuition. I jumped down from the bunk and I ran to the door. In that minute, when I ran out the door, everybody in that room was killed. Only me and that boy who ran away from that. Everybody was lined up. They were all dead because a bomb hit the room that I was in. And everybody was killed. So all those things, it's mind-boggling. While I was in Budapest, also they came in. The Germans came in every morning, and they took us. They came to the basements, and they picked whoever they could pick up, and they took them to work. At one point, they took us to a place where the Germans had a big, warehouse, and they couldn't go into the warehouse. There was a metal fence, that used to go by electricity, and they wanted to go in to unload and load the stuff there. So they couldn't go in there. So they made us go up on that metal fence and shake it. And whoever went out, and they hit me in the head with a rifle. I should also go up. I didn't want to go up. I got hit a few times, and I didn't go. And all the boys who went in there, they were cut in half, and they died. So in all those things, and then after the liberation also, I was liberated in Budapest, but there was no communication to go back to any place. So I didn't know to the extent of the problem that we really have. So I picked myself up and I walked from Budapest. There was a couple of other youngsters. There were boys there they came from the place that my wife comes from Karpatarus. They knew how to speak Russian because we were liberated by the Russians. So I'm jumping from one.
Well, did you know at this point what had happened to your family?
No, I'm
no
trying
idea.
I had I knew something terrible had happened, but after the liberation, I picked myself up. I wanted to walk home, and I did walk home. I walked from Budapest till Debrecen. That's one big city. From Budapest, that was about 150 miles, 200 miles from that point. So I walked from that point to get some kind of train or whatever.
Were you by yourself?
No, I wasn't by myself. I said I hooked up with
those
boys from they could speak to the Russian army. In this way, I was saved actually because they had very little food themselves. So they took us to work. When it came, for instance, we worked all day long for the Russians. I said I was waiting till they should give me some food. He said if I sleep there till next day, then the next day they're gonna give me some food. But they didn't do that. They didn't give me enough food. They gave me a little coffee with no bread, no water. Maybe there was something in the soup. I don't know. I don't even remember. And they said if you worked another day, we're going to give you next day. I saw there is no. This is not the way to survive here. So I spoke to the boys. I said this is no good. So we started. We were sleeping during the day, and at night we walked from farm to farm. While we got some food, it was so hectic. For instance, I didn't have what to eat, so I found a jar of sauerkraut. It was frozen. It was the winter time already, and I broke the jar and I ate that. That was the food that I survived on. And if I found a farmer who was merciful enough to give me a lot of potatoes and to cook it yet for us, that was something that it was the best tasting food. That's why I have a problem today with bread. No, it's psychological. I cannot give up bread. I cannot, because bread was such a phenomenal thing that to have a piece of bread. Just imagine, I was not in Auschwitz. Imagine those people who went through all the other things. So I finally came home, and I waited for a while that somebody to come home, because I really did not understand the whole extent of our calamity. For instance, when I came home to the city, Cluj was a city of 120,000 Jews. When I came back, there was nobody there. There was nobody there. No. But Cluj was a city where they had a lot of hospitals. There was a center for, all the surrounding area was Romania. Actually, if they would have tell us, if somebody would know that Romania, that they do not kill the Jews, they don't take them away, we could have run from Cluj, we could have walked over. At night or whatever, by hook or by crook, we could have wound up in Romania. But nobody really was smart enough to understand that would save us. So we had to. We were really we were in a situation that we couldn't. Because it was really a tragedy that our leaders did not advise us. They did not give us the right information. That being that now retroactively, I know that they had that information, because some people. I was there with Custer. Remember who Custer was? He was in Cluj. He was. I remember him. He was a salesman in a big store. And the same thing, other people, they were involved. They were in the Unrat, and they knew but they had certain information. They took a group of people. They took them to Switzerland, and they told them, as soon as the Jews from the city will be deported, they're going to go to Switzerland. So instead of telling us we should run to Romania, they told us to stay there and we're going to go to work. In that that was the information that they shouldn't have given us. They should give us, please, anybody who could run, anybody who has legs and he could even he doesn't have to take nothing with him because people will have mercy on them on the other side and they will give him food. So they didn't have that. So it's. This is one of the tragedies that we will never understand. We will never comprehend. When I came back, I was home for a nice couple of months, and nobody came back. So I picked myself up. In that time, I went to Germany.
Did you live in your own family home when you went back to
No,
Cluj?
everything was locked up. They couldn't go. I lived with friends. So there was somebody. Matter of fact, there was very few friends that came back. Whatever kid came back, we hooked up with each other. And I was there for about 6 months. Matter of fact, I was before the war. In order to help out my family, I used to have machines. I used to make socks, so like knitting socks. And when I came back, I wanted to establish another. Myself. When I came back home, I figured I'll get a little wool. I get some of the machines, and I'll make myself a factory. And when I spoke to Russian soldiers, they told me, "Are you crazy? You'll be lucky if they'll make you somebody in the factory. They'll make you a foreman or whatever it is to work in the factory. And if they want to, they're gonna pick you up. If you you have a factory, they pick you up and they send you to Siberia. So don't do it." So I was there for a couple of months, and I put everything that I accumulated. I put it on the attic. And I picked myself up and I smuggled myself through Hungary to Czechoslovakia and into Austria, and there I wound up in Germany.
Did you do that by yourself?
All by myself. Listen, you have to, you gotta have the will to survive. You do things that you have to do. It's just.
And you said your grandmother had 5 children, including your mother. Did none of them survive?
No.
No. Did your father have brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
And none of them survived
No.
either? No. So you were the only one?
No. I have a younger brother that survived. Also, he was younger than me, but somehow he was lucky enough to. He was in Auschwitz. He was all over. He was in Buchenwald. Today he lives in Montreal. He lives in Canada.
How did you find him after the war?
Through people, to contacts, they told me that he survived the war, and that's how we got to.
I see.
Matter of fact, I wanted him to come to the United States, but he never wound up to come to the United States because he came to Montreal, and being that he went to the children's home in France, he learned how to speak French. So Montreal is a French-speaking city, so for him it was advantageous to be there. In matter of fact, right away they picked him up and they gave him a job to work in a store, and he could survive much better than I came to the United States. I worked for $27 a week, and he didn't have to do that. So I told him, "Don't come here because what could you do here?" There, he was like right away, and he succeeded, and he went into this business. They called them, certain what do you call that? A customer peddler. I don't know if you ever knew that. He worked with the French people. He used to take merchandise, and but a little while he worked for a store, and then he said to himself, "Why do I have to work for the store? I could work for myself." And he survived very nicely.
Now, when did you find out that he was alive?
While I was still in Germany. When I went back to Germany, somebody came from France, and they told him that they met him in a children's home, and he's there.
Now, where did you live in Germany?
Landsberg.
In the DP camp?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was when I smuggled myself to Germany, I hooked up with the Bricha. And they were supposed to bring us to Israel, and they took me to the Italian border. I was there for a couple of days, and then they caught up with the exodus. So they didn't want to take additional people to Israel. They should end up in Cyprus. So they took us, instead of taking us to Israel, they took us to Landsberg, to Germany. In there I stayed for a while. And I saw that I cannot go to Israel right away. So being that, in Germany, I didn't want to stay in Germany. So I figured that the only place, either I go to the United States or I go to Israel. Into the United States, I didn't have anybody here in this country. So I said, the boys advised me, go register to the United States, being that I was still in the age that I could figure out a way to. So I put myself on the list. I was in 1946, in September, I was already in the United States. I came with the first transport to the United States. Mrs. Roosevelt was the initiator of that.
Now that's when you put down that you were younger than you really were to get on that transport.
That's right.
Now, when did you learn what had happened to your family?
When I came back home, and I was there for a couple of months home, and I saw that nobody's there to come back. So I figured that, little by little, because I was when I came back, I was practically the first few boys who came back to the city. And there was nobody there. We had another problem in the city. When Jews die, they need burial. I was the one who used to do the burial because they had people from Romania. They came to the hospitals, and they died in the hospitals after the war. They died there. So somebody had to do the burial, and there was no Chaver Kedisha. There was nobody to do it. So I used to. They didn't have water. I used to carry buckets of water and to wash the people.
So you were the Chaver Kedisha?
I was the Chaver Kedisha.
And when did you learn about Auschwitz?
Then the things, they were everybody was talking. Matter of fact, I could have gone to Bucharest, and there they gave certain types of monies to put these people. I never bothered. I did not. I stayed in the city, and I waited until somebody should come home. Nobody came home, so I picked myself up and I smuggled myself to all those places, and I came to Germany, and that's how I wound up to come to the United States.
How long were you in Landsberg?
I don't remember exact how long. A nice couple of months. I couldn't come to the United States from Landsberg. There was always people to give you advice. Go to a different camp. So I was. I don't even remember the little town next to Landsberg. In there I went, and from there I registered to come to the. Instead of going to. Going for München. München was the closest city that you could register to go to come to the United States. So I went to Frankfurt. From there I registered. So that was really no problem to. So that is the story of my life. At least if you wanna. If you want to go on, there are so many things that could, that comes along that you could talk about, but it's really hard. I can't even remember everything that happened. So if you have any questions, if I could answer, I gladly would be able to. I see I'm going. Not in the right, when I start from one place.
Okay.
Well, that's all right. It doesn't have to be chronological.
Chronological.
Now, you grew up in an Orthodox home?
Yeah, very Orthodox. That's another problem of religious people who came back. That we see people who don't believe. With all the things that I went through personally, when you see certain individual people that they were helped, for instance, in my city, there was a family when they took everybody away. there was across the street from us, there was a neighbor. His name was Goldstein. Goldstein's wife was a very, very sick woman. That she had a heart problem, and when everybody was taken to that the brick factory, they couldn't take her because she would have died, and they didn't have stretchers to take her. So they left her there. Which they had a little private home, and they didn't take that family. When I came home, I saw Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein survive from the whole town, one family.
I mean, they never left the town?
No, that's what I'm trying to tell you. People who skeptical on our belief, that you don't believe that there is a God. Let's put it this very bluntly. Who could? But if you experience certain episodes, that this couple this woman was sick, and I came home, and I was practically the first few people in the town, and I go over and I see Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein is in their apartment. I said, he said his name was Nissen Goldstein. I said, well, Nissen, what happened? He said, in the beginning, they forgot about us. They left my wife and me. They left me there in the apartment. And after a while, what did I eat? There was a big dog next door to my apartment, and they were feeding the dog. And I used to go over the fence, and I used to take the part of the food that the dog used to get. I used to share it with the dog, and that's what we survived on. And that's how. And after a while, you see, I was standing by the door, and I was davening. I had my tallis and tefillin on my head, and there used to be big glass doors in the village. You know, whoever had those type of houses, and I was standing with my tallis and tefillin, and the Nazis came for us, all prepared they should take us away, being that they saw me dressed in my head, and I was standing by the door. They got scared of me, and they walked out, and they never came back. And that's how we survived. So how could you, from 20,000 people, if one couple survives, with all the skepticism that I have, so you have to believe. In all the time that, for instance, that I did not, I went through, like that episode that I told you with the fence. Everybody was cut in pieces, and I was intact. I came back. It's not because I wanted to come back. I came back because there was something, I had to start all over again. So what is there to say? How could you answer? You can answer the question because there is a lot of people, big knowledgeable people. They try to tell you were sinners, and that's why. But this is nonsense. This is not an answer. Nobody has answers for this type of tragedies. But in spite of all that, I stayed. First of all, I had to believe because my father was a very, very pious person, and he told me when I was a child. I was the oldest son, and he divulged certain information to me. I saw that this man, my father, he never slept all week long in a bed. He used to, I don't know if you know what chatzos is. When you get up in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, King David used to do that when he was a young man. He used to get up 12 o'clock and he used to get up every 12 o'clock at night. He didn't sleep from Shabbos to Shabbos. He did not sleep in a bed, my father. And he was such a knowledge. And he told me, listen, you're the oldest son. I see so many things that it's going to happen to the Jews in the future. It's just impossible to bear. But one thing I beg you, I want you to stay religious. I want you to stay religious. If inculcation that he had, that I wanted to do him a favor, that I should do the things that he knew, and he wanted us to stay in this. So how could you give it up? Not because you believe in it, but you have to believe. Yeah, to a certain degree, it's skepticism. There's a lot of skepticism. There's no question about it. That I'm very skeptical. But you know, if he was very poor, and he said to me when I was young, I do not want nothing from God. I just want you children to stay in your fault. Don't go away from your fault. And if he had that kind of issue with all the problems that he had, so I had to do him a favor, let's put it this way, and do it.
So you owe it to your father's memory.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. Perfectly legitimate. Yeah. Now, you spoke Yiddish at home?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you knew you knew Romanian also?
Yeah, I know. I still remember. I still speak it.
Romanian. Any other languages you know?
Yeah, I speak it. A little French, not French, Italian, German.
But when you came to New York, you didn't know any English?
No.
Nothing at all.
When I saw the first time, I saw an American boy, and I saw the American army in Germany. I saw them speak. It sounded so fast. It sounded like they have something in their hot potatoes in their mouth. And I figured that I'll never learn the language. And when I came to New York, I started just listening to the radio. And in taking a newspaper, I used to learn, every day I used to learn 1 or 2 words. And I really never went to school when I came to that. Somehow, being that I was already at the age, I didn't have a home. I didn't have where to survive, so I had to go to work. So I did not really have so I learned by myself. My wife did go a little bit to night school, but also, and she hardly has an accent. She speaks very nicely.
Now, how much schooling did you have in Cluj?
In Cluj, I had only the 4th grade.
Only the 4th grade?
Only 4th grade. We didn't. I told you, they took us, Jewish boys, they took us right away to, they put us into labor. It was all the years, even before the tragedy came, so big. We had, I couldn't go out in the street to walk, They used to have young Gentile boys used to go to work, and when they see Jewish boys, they were attacking them. So we had problems constantly. And don't think that they were, like they say, you Jews are rich. We were as poor as the church mouse. I was walking with, I hardly had any shoes. When I was bar mitzvah, my what do you call that, a quarter, who goes by the bris, and the man who holds the sandik. He was my sandik, so when I was bar mitzvah, he did me a favor, he bought me a pair of shoes. That was my bar mitzvah present. So life was extremely difficult. So it's.
Now, who took care of you when you came to New York? You didn't know
Mrs. Roosevelt, they put me in a children's home.
In a children's home?
I was in the Bronx in a children's home, and from there, there were a lot of people who wanted to adopt me. They came from all over the United States, but being that I knew that I cannot go any place, because if I will go any place, I will not stay religious. So I didn't want to go. So I stayed in New York, and from here I went to work at the I was working first in the necktie factory. We made ties. And then I established myself, and I had a little shop myself.
Where in the Bronx was the children's home, do you know?
I don't remember that. I remember there was an elevator subway when we got there. I don't know where it was. Caldwell Avenue, is there such a...
What avenue?
Caldwell?
Caldwell, I don't know. Caldwell. It may be.
I think it was Caldwell. along the way there is quite a bit of, but the memory is very, very. Being that I just told you that as a child, I had a very, very difficult childhood. Being that my grandmother was a widow by 19, she was a widow with 5 children. And my father was an orphan when he was extremely young also. So they constantly, hardships. So this, brought my whole life into. I don't know how I survived mentally, that I am not completely crazy. I know that I'm not completely sane, but to survive such tragedies, to survive such hardships. And in the United States, I didn't have so. Yeah, I have two children, and I have 2 daughters. And when she was 42 years old, she had 6 children, and she passed away. That broke me down completely. She got ovarian cancer, and she died.
Oh.
She left her family, 6 children, and this with all the things that happened to me in all my life. This is my biggest tragedy in my life. Because the tragedy in home with everything, everybody, I wasn't the only one who suffered. We were a group of people, and we were together. We tried to talk to each other.
Did you ever talk to your children about your experiences?
Never.
Never.
Matter of fact, my children never knew Hungarian. We spoke. Both of us speak the language. And most people who come from Hungary, they do speak the language in their house. But my children, I never wanted to there were certain things that I just did not want to. The only time that we started, when they started to go to school, they heard about it and they learned. But they really don't know to the extent of the problem that I had. In my wife also. My wife had a little bit bad. It wasn't so tragic. Her childhood was probably not so tragic as mine. So she survived. She was also very young girl. She worked in Germany in the coal mines, in the military installations that factories. So it's. Is there anything else you want to ask me?
Not unless there's something else that you can think
No,
of.
listen, this is my biggest tragedy. In my whole surviving life, that I lost my daughter, 6 children. And I could never believe it will happen. When she was sick, I said to myself, God is not going to do it again.
Well, you remembered a lot more than you said you thought you would be able to. And we thank you so much for taking the time to tell the story.
Like you said, it wasn't chronologically. Certain things when you start out and you go places to places. The Germans, being that I was not in Auschwitz, and I was not in the, being that I was actually thrown out of that. It actually say, I think if I would be, although my brother, he was only 14 years old, and he survived it. So because he had to survive also. He's got a family, and he survived it. He doesn't even. My brother, he was younger than me. He was 4 years younger than me. He actually even did not remember when I met him. He did not even know my father's real name.
He had forgotten his name?
No, for instance, my father's name was Shmuel Yehuda Aron. Yehuda is a lion, and what he remembered that he was his name was altogether. He had a different picture of his father's name.
Huh.
When he opened up my Kasutuba, and he saw that what I wrote down, he said, "That wasn't your father's name."
Oh.
And I said to him, "I'm older than you are, so I was the oldest boy, so I know certain things that." You see, my life, is the fact that my grandmother, she had children. Some of the children got married, and some of the children never got married. I had, for instance, my grandmother had 4 daughters. Two of them, my mother, and then she had 2 single daughters. If a daughter could not get married just for the simple reason because she was poor, that also, I was just very young, but it affected me to such a degree. I had an aunt, she was so intelligent. If you had to write to the authorities, to the high authorities, they came to her to put together a letter. And if a girl like that, she was beautiful. She was a beautiful woman. She couldn't get married because she was a poor widow's daughter. And that affected me as a child. I just couldn't understand it. Matter of fact, if she got a chance to get married to some old man, she asked me, and I was just she asked me, "Shall I marry this man?" I said, "No, I would rather if you stay single." That's what my advice as a youngster to her. Well, I should give away your life, because she had an older sister than her, and she did marry one of those old men. And she had a terrible, that was the life. I didn't see nothing, that a young girl, a young beautiful woman should marry such a. So I advised her, and she never married, and that's also one of the facts that affected my life. Very, very, I could not comprehend, I could not understand. And that's the way it was in Europe. Here, at least, a girl could go to work, she's independent, and she could survive, she doesn't have to depend on a man to support her. Europe was... especially a poor people. Very, very few poor girls really got married. If they didn't have a background they put up a store for a man or for a young man, or they put them in business. So this way they could find one. But otherwise they stay single.
Well, I think you remembered more than you thought you would.
It's important. I hope my children, my grandchildren will not have to suffer, have to go through. Thank God I have a son, he's an engineer, so he worked himself up, which I have to be thankful for, because a young man in the United States, all right, he went to yeshiva. In the yeshiva, he did not, here in the certain yeshivas, they don't know how to handle all kinds of youngsters. If you're bright and if you are a genius, then you're okay. But if you're not the brightest, then they step on you, and it affected him But being that he was more than I thought he was. You see, when he was a youngster. He went to the yeshiva, and when he came out, he didn't want to. He didn't want to be religious. He didn't. And then he really went to a yeshiva, and he wanted to. My youngest daughter, the one that I lost, went to Israel, and she met there a young man, and she got married. So being that she was in Israel, so he, from high school, but he hardly finished high school, he went to Israel, and he wanted to settle down in Israel, and he wanted to become one of those learners, sidders. Also, you have to believe in certain destiny. There was a certain rabbi there. He saw this young man. He asked him, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I want to sit down and learn. I didn't learn in the yeshiva in America. I want to sit down and learn here." He said, "No, you go home and you do what your father tells you." And that saved him. He came back here because he was very impressed, because he said that this rabbi spoke to him to a certain degree. He spoke to him certain things that was left. He never spoke to nobody. He didn't express himself to nobody. The inner sanctum. This rabbi read his mind, read his heart, and he understood that child. So he said, "You go home and you do what your father tells you." So he came home. He said, "Dad, I did not learn too much in the yeshiva, so I want to do the right thing. I want you to support me, and I want to go to the yeshiva. I learned something." And he went to Farakove. There was a Rabbi Freifeld. He supported these newcomers who did not know too much, and he embraced them with such love. And he was there for a year. He said, "After the year, let me stay there for a year and learn something. After the year, I'll do what you want me to do." So after the year, he listened to me. He went to Ort, and he learned how to fix computers.
Yeah.
And it was very good. So, but being that he was a bright young man, he was working for Exxon in the computer field. He was working for Exxon, but it was hard. He had to go with a little wagon, go from office to office, fix the computer. And he said to me, "Listen, Dad, this is not for me. I want to do a little better than that. If you're going to support me, I want to go to engineering school." I said to him, "Jay, are you crazy? How could you go to engineering school? In high school, engineering is all math. So how you going to survive?" So he went, believe me, he went to Pratt Institute, and he met there a couple of young men, also in Pratt. To be religious, it's a very, very difficult thing. But being that, you see, also, that's destiny. He met there 3 youngsters just like him, religious youngsters, and all 3 of them went to engineering school. He was so good in engineering, he was on the dean's list in Pratt. You see, if things have to happen, so that was, this is a loss in life that and also my daughters, and I have a son-in-law. I have one granddaughter is a doctor. There's a lawyer. So you really accomplished in your new life. You accomplished. So you have to be thankful for what you give it.
Good. Well,
Well,
that's a good
we
place
thank
to
you.
stop.
This is a good stopping place
Yeah.
for us. We
Thank
thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
You're very welcome.